If you make it a habit, it will get done. Listen in as the two business guys talk about how to make a habit and immerse yourself in what you're trying to get accomplished. Enjoy. This business podcast, the Two Business Guys Mastermind, uncovers for you secrets and share tips and tricks to entrepreneurship as they mastermind on how to have startup, operational, and overall business success so that you can go on to get better results. Enjoy. So, hey, everybody, welcome back. And, this is going to be a fired up session today. And you may think as you listen to it that, oh my gosh, you're all over the place, but it's focusing in on this big plan that Rob and I have to, we want to help some companies and then we want to grow our own business right now. Here's what ended up happening. I want to tell you guys this story. So one of the big deals behind what we're doing. Hey, by the way, Rob, how you doing, man? How are you?
What's going on, brother? Appreciate it.
I was just going to dive right in, right? So we're going to,
we were already talking. They just coming in on the conversation now.
You guys get in on it. So here's the thing, right? So I kind of had a come into Jesus moment with myself, right? I had a talk with myself, and that was how I'm trying to get some things done just wasn't working. And then what does work? Now, for me, immersion, just jumping in. Now, if you listen to our podcast and you've heard me talk a little bit about focus and the power of focus and things like that, right? Mm-hmm. But what came to mind, Rob, was something I noticed from a lot of different things. So a lot of different inputs made me think, you know what, we got to throw this in. One was a health opportunity. Now I had a health opportunity to, just refine my health, right? Save my health because I was going down the wrong path, right? I had been eating cookies and cakes and just doing whatever I wanted to do, dropping the carbs in. And my body finally said, enough of that. Mm-hmm. Right. And there was potential bad outcomes. Right. So now here's something that I noticed. I had been trying other ways to get it back in the whack. I had been intermittent fasting. I had been doing all these different things. Right. That wasn't working because after I would intermittent fast, then I go and, go get 10 cookies. And by the next day I got 2. It just wasn't working. And then again, I just had to come to Jesus moment. So yesterday, all right, after I had just decided 94 days ago, I'm going all in on health, right? Going all in on health. Now, don't get afraid, y'all out there, because when I talk about immersion, I know that just absolutely works, right? When you commit to something and go out in. I'm going to bring it back around to the business that Rob and I started and some of the situations that I noticed that could keep us from having success, right? Now, going all in on health. So, Rob, in 94 days, I've been able to, get down to my goal weight. 94 days, goal weight. And I had set a goal of getting under a certain amount. I was, for my height and body structure, I shouldn't have been carrying around 205 pounds. I shouldn't have been carried around 190 pounds. It looked good because I had some muscles and all that. The body was like, nope, there's cookies and, So, Rob, I ended up saying to myself, now there was something that made me do it. It was a strong motivation. Right? We talk about the external and internal motivations of what's going to make you do this thing. What's going to make you make your $1 million, your $100,000 a month? What's going to make you change your life? All right. And it was something that it was either I do it or bad outcome. Okay. So I set myself a little bit of a goal. Right. And I said, I'm going all in. 94 days later, 22 pounds lost. Right. Now, if y'all seen from, my face was a little puffier. Now it's not. So 94 days, 22 2 pounds lost, all levels great.
Nice.
Where the doc is looking and going, what did you do? What's happening? Or how did this blood pressure that was creeping up, genetics, right? And after a certain age, you get past 40, things are, and then and all of these things, man. So I went all in, Rob. Went all in. Now, you get teased a little bit. Oh, that's, you can't do that. That's not healthy. Right. And I says, you know what? I'm taking a specific approach. And I did a high protein approach. I got rid of all the carbs. Just about all of them went down because this was intense. This was I'm going to do this because if I don't, bad outcomes.
Yep.
I couldn't wait. I couldn't do a 6 months. Well, I'll try a little bit of this. Now that relates to business in a certain way, guys. If you go all in, proof is in the pudding that you will get good results. Now Rob and I have debated this a little bit. And you're going to jump in here in a minute.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to talk about a couple of people that I love these all in guys, right? They go all in and then we're watching the success. Yeah. So Rob, here's something that we've talked a little bit about. We've said, hey, listen, we spin up a business. We're going to do this. We're going to make X amount of dollars in 90 days. We're going to help these companies just totally 100%, 10X, whatever. We're going to go all in. And then I started thinking, wait a minute. As soon as we went all in, guess what? I got super busy with other stuff. Then a week goes by. Right? We set a time frame, y'all, and a week goes by. Then we say, well, we're going to help we're going to get 2 companies and we're going to dive in on their businesses. We're going to help them get X amount and then they're going to pay us half. Whatever. Next thing you know, we couldn't make the meetings. We couldn't make the meetings because they're busy. Hey, now 2 weeks go by. And I started thinking, this is some crap. And what brought this all around was I stepped on the scale. And I had realized I knew I had been losing weight and stuff like that. And that was cool. Right. But I hadn't measured it in this particular way. I stepped on the scale and I was 0.8 pounds below my goal weight.
Nice.
Man, I was overjoyed. Now you talk about this in your book. Okay. You've hit your goal. Don't keep moving the goalposts. Celebrate that win.
There we go.
Celebrate that win. So Rob, when I think about the business that we're spinning up, I'm of the mind that, for me at least, I have to put a huge amount of concentration on it. I got to immerse myself. And hey, here's a funny story, y'all. You guys you see I'm fired up, right? Here's a funny story.
Understatement.
And this is another story on the story. Here's what I noticed and why this just works so much. When the pandemic was kicking off, when the pandemic was acknowledged, right? 2020 or whatever, nobody could go anywhere, but I had a hoop court across the street from my house. So I would go over there every day and I would say, you know what? I'm a right-handed shooter. But I want to shoot with my left. Rob, I concentrated all during that time on shooting with my left. And it was totally uncomfortable, but I immersed myself. Now, they loosened things up, a couple of years later, I stopped shooting hoops, started, doing whatever everybody else was doing. Well, just the other day, I go back over to the court. And do you know my left hand literally felt so comfortable. I was doing layup. In fact, it had almost become the preferred hand. I tried to do a right-handed layup and it felt weird. So
yep.
Immersion.
No, you're exactly right. And I mean, and I know we're going to get into habit a little bit later, but I think one of the things that's really important when we're looking at this, because oftentimes I want to frame the debate, because I know we're going to get into what does immersion look like and all the rest of that type of stuff. But I want to frame the debate, because I know we talk about it a lot of times, and what you feel like is that we're on different sides of this argument. And the reality is, of the argument, what we're really talking about is how to do what I think we both agree in is necessary. But to your point, it's so often what we forget, and I love this quote from Bill Gates. I've heard it from Tony Robbins, some other people, but the first person I ever heard it from was Bill Gates. So that's where my attribution goes. It says we overestimate what we can accomplish in a year but we grossly underestimate what we can accomplish in 5 years. And it's basically talking about the fact that so many people don't recognize the impact of consistent effort over time.
Consistent effort over time.
Right. And one of the things that I talk about and I teach, and you've seen it in my Thriving in Chaos book, is there's a power called the compounding effect of small efforts over time, small, focused, directed efforts over time.
Yeah. And we've talked about that before, right?
Right. And when you talk about working on your left hand, that power is there, because here's the thing that happens when you work on your left hand for a considerable amount of time. I remember I was the exact same way. It's back when I was in college, and I had the same issue. I could blow by anybody I needed to blow by with my right hand, but once they figured out that I was going right, it became harder. I had to go right. And they used to talk about Michael Jordan was like this, and even in the NBA, I remember the Detroit Pistons talked about, if you could, Michael never went more than 2 dribbles to his left, so you just had to withstand those 2 dribbles to his left, and you knew he was coming back right. Mm-hmm. And then once he figured out his spots, he never needed more than 2 dribbles to his left. So then you was stuck because he was already setting you up beforehand before he went left. And that's where he became Michael Jordan, the amazing, right? But same thing, I would go and I couldn't go left to the basket. It felt awkward. It felt weird. And I spent an entire summer literally breaking down how I went to the basket with my right hand. And I started just with the 1-2 and the layup and trying to figure out how do I do a finger roll with my left hand, because I can do a finger roll with my right hand, but I had to shoot it with my left hand and all of that, break it down and go for it. What happens over time is that becomes hardwired in your brain chemistry and your neurobiology such that the muscle memory is there.
That's it, man. The muscle memory.
And it's like riding a bike. You can never forget what you have once learned. It can just be a little bit more difficult to access, but once you start priming that access again, then it's there. And why is that so important for the entrepreneurs that we're talking to, and for the things I think what we're going to talk about here later, is because of the fact that immersion that you're talking about is necessary to overcome the inertia, to overcome the moment so that you can start generating momentum. And so I agree with you wholeheartedly about immersion. I definitely want to get into what your definition of immersion is. So I think that's something, maybe let's go to that next. Randy, tell the people what you mean when you say immersion.
Yeah, and it's about something that I remember reading in The Power of Habit, right? Mm-hmm. And Charles this is Charles Duhigg. You guys, you may or may not be able to see this that good.
Yeah, put it in front of your chest.
You can't see it. All right, The Power of Habit. Here it is. All right. And in there he talked about that. I want to read this to you guys. It says, hundreds of habits influence our days. They guide how we get dressed in the morning, talk to our kids, and fall asleep at night. They impact what we eat for lunch, how we do business, and whether we exercise or have beer after work. Each of them has different cues and offers a unique reward. Some are simple and others are complex, drawing upon emotional triggers and offering subtle neurochemical prizes. Now, here's something key, y'all. This is on page 270 of his book, hardcover. However, to modify a habit, you must decide to change it. Here's the thing that happened. I have been in such man of leisure mode. Mm-hmm. I'm serious, right? I had decided how I want to run the rest of my life. And at a certain point, I says, you know what? Forget the 9 to 5. I'm going to be a man of leisure. And I tell you, when it came time to deciding on this big goal, there was a conflict. Mm-hmm. Man of leisure was like, what is going on? Mm-hmm. So there was this separation. Right now, there's some psychological terms for it. I can't think of it right now, but
cognitive dissonance. Yeah.
Dissonance, right? So what ended up happening, Rob, is I knew what I could do from the eating part, right? Remember I told you, I says, I was trying to go on this thing because I needed to, do something fast, otherwise there's going to be some bad outcomes. Mm-hmm. And I was able to just jump in. Now that works for me. I wasn't able to kind of subtly slide into it. I had tried it, didn't work. Mm-hmm. Every single thing that I've had success with has been about just deciding to change the way I did some things, right?
Right.
So, and I know with the goal that we have put in front of us, it's a big one, right? And there's another book I want to reference too, but the immersion part of it, the jumping in and deciding that this is what I'm going to concentrate on. And Rob, you said this before, you know, there's certain things I'm not going to do because it takes away from the life that I built. Right. And I used to wonder about this. I used to wonder, you know, we had these super producers that just all of a sudden they stopped, these, you know, actresses and recording artists that they were just like phenoms. Right. And then they got rich and they stopped. The one guy that I respect a lot, especially for what he was able to accomplish, it's primarily for what he was able to accomplish, was Floyd Mayweather. Because guess what? He never got out of shape. You see, he made a part of his craft something that he did every single day. There was no, hey, you know, I have an off season. There was no off season. And as a result, he's never
stay ready so you ain't got to get ready.
So now, does that cause you to build a certain kind of life for yourself? Yes, it does. Does it cause you to be almost maniacally focused? You start thinking about these folks that, you know, I think about Tyler Perry. What does he do? Habitually write scripts, habitually create shows, habitually. He's just doing it not as something that's extra. This is the key, everyone. It's not extra. So I'm thinking
Stephen King, same thing. Warren Buffett, same thing.
Has to write. Stephen King said he has to write. He feels weird when he doesn't. So now that to me, and then, okay, all right. Now here's the basketball. I was thinking about Steph Curry. I know you guys. I'm all over the place today. I was thinking about Steph Curry.
My favorite player, current player,
and you know, just won another championship. That's 4 total. Right now, we know MJ's got 6, but I thought, who's got more? Steve Kerr's got 9. Right? Steve Kerr was on the Bulls. He was on San Antonio, and now he's won 4 as a coach. These are guys that have put. What's the football coach? Alabama.
Nick Saban.
We're talking about creating an environment where this is not something that's extra.
Exactly.
Right, now I got to throw a little DEI stuff in here. And I say the DEI because I was talking with and helping an organization. And I said to them, they was like, well, you know, we're doing this DEI thing. And, you know, and I says, you know what? DEI is not something that's a line item. Right? I said to him, I says, it is something that you become and then you are. It's like skin. You're either going to be diverse, equitable, and inclusive, right? It is not something that you decide you're going to do, and then it's the new shiny thing. So anyway, I just wanted to leave that there, everyone, you know, because
I think that's a good point that you're making.
And doing versus this line item.
I think it's a really important point that you're making, which is, and this goes to, I think, what the heart of our conversation is here today. The whole key is you have to decide who you are going to become. You have to decide that you are going to change, that you are going to be something different. And with all the people that you talked about, I love the analogy when you talk about Tyler Perry, like Jerry Seinfeld had a thing for a very long time. He would write a joke a day. That was just his routine, right? A joke a day. At the end of the year, you got 360, right? And he would, and at the end of a year, you got at least 365 jokes if you've done the bare minimum, right? That you can sort through, that you can use all the rest of that. And the big thing that I want to point out there is that each of those people that you're talking about, they made sure that they made time for part of who they were in their everyday. And this goes to the point where we talked about, and again, we talk about this in the book.
One more time. They made time.
They made time for part of who they were in every day, right? And this goes back to this step 3 in Thrive. Who they were, exactly, right? This is step 3 in thriving in chaos, right? The whole idea is schedule your priorities, right? So many people struggle, and a lot of this pulls from the book that has been screaming all while you were talking is one of my favorite books, quintessential book that if you haven't read it, you need to read it at least 3 times. It's a book by the great late Dr. Stephen Covey. entitled The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Sure. Yeah, I read it.
And one of the things, not you, I mean the listeners, I know you read it. We can talk about it a billion times. But for the listeners, if you haven't read it, read it at least 3 times, because you're not going to get it all in one sitting. But one of the things that he talks about, and this is towards the end, this is one of the reasons why I'm telling you read it 3 times, because the first 2/3 of the book gonna blow your mind. The first couple of times, you're not even gonna notice this part at the end until you get to it about the 3rd time. What he talks about at the end is he talks about the fact that so many of us don't recognize that we have multiple roles that we play in our lives, right? And this is where the monomaniacal focus, this is where I pull back from the idea of monomaniacal focus, right? There are certain people who are able to pull off monomaniacal focus, and we can say that works for them, but it doesn't work for them if I'm taking them as an example of who I want to be. Perfect example, Elon Musk. Elon Musk has been married 3 times. I don't want to get married 3 times to be a billionaire, right?
I think more than that. He married somebody else twice.
He's been married he's been married to 3 different people. He's got all types of different relationships, right? Like you look at, there are a number of these different people that when you look at people, you can take one thing of what they did and understand it in a vacuum. But the key is you want to also be able to look at what they've been able to do in the other areas of their lives. One of the people that I look up to is Denzel Washington. And one of the reasons that I look up to Denzel, and if you watch how Denzel moves, he moves a lot different. Even though he has similar level of success, he moves a lot different than a lot of these other successful people. And a lot of the reasons that he moves a lot different, he's been married to the same woman for over 20 years, right? I think 30 years now, 30 years, something like that. They have very successful children, and he's successful in his professional career. He's successful in business endeavors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's important for us to remember, and this is what Stephen Covey says. He says that you play multiple roles in your life, and all of them are who you are. You have a role that you play with your family. That is who you are, right? It is a choice that we make to be married, to be parents, to be all the rest of that. And for you to act as, I was just coaching a student about this the other day, for you to act as if your family is pulling you away from another role, belies the fact that you have chosen that part of your identity, part of who you want to be, is a family person who is a good husband, a good wife, a good partner, a good parent. And to deny a part of yourself as if it's in conflict is literally to be fighting with yourself. And so when we're looking at this focus, this is where the compounding effort comes in. And this is why I want everybody to pay attention to this. So often we think that what they do is just focus on it. It's like Warren Buffett will tell you, he reads and studies companies about 8 hours a day. That's his normal work day, is studying companies. He doesn't say that he works 12, 14, 16 hours a day trying to make money. That's not what he does. His work is studying companies. And then occasionally he goes and makes decisions on companies. And that work every day allows him to make great decisions, which allows him to grow his portfolio and grow his wealth. Yeah. But he was home. He ate dinner the same time every night. Like, he was a family man. He did all of that. He wasn't monomaniacally focused on his business such that he wasn't able to raise his children, raise his family, and all the rest of that. And I think that so often I remember I was watching, and I'm a big fan of the Pivot podcast. Fred Taylor, Channing Crowder, and Ryan Clark, former NFL football players, and they had Coach Mike Tomlin on. I
think I saw that the other day.
Right?
Yeah. Didn't they just have him on?
Yeah, they just had him on. It was just like last week's episode, I believe. And he is, going to be a Hall of Fame coach, most successful Black coach in the history of the NFL. I think the only coach in the history of the NFL to have 15 winning seasons to start his career, 15 winning seasons, never have a losing season. And one of the things that he talked about, which was so amazing, he got hired by Tony Dungy when he was 28 years old, coming in. It's his first job as a coach. Mm-hmm. And he had just had his son was three months old, I believe. And he's coming in, and he's from a broken home. He grew up just his mom, and he's trying to figure this whole thing out. And he's trying to figure out how to be a father and all the rest of it. And he's worried because he's like, he knows ball, he knows how to work, but he doesn't know how to be a good husband, how to be a good father, because he's never seen that. And he's trying to figure out how he's going to balance all of those and be all about ball and all about family and all the rest of that. And what he says is, in his first hour on the job, he goes Tony Dungy's office because Tony had called him to talk to him about something. And Tony's son is in his office playing a video game on the TV while Tony is doing his work. And he was able to see the embodiment of what he was trying to a coach, because he was not just coach, just ball, whatever. He was, and everybody you can, I mean, I highly recommend you all read Tony Dungy's autobiography as well. Phenomenal book, phenomenal lesson in how to do all of those things. If you look at Tony Dungy, amazing husband, amazing father, amazing football coach. Everybody loves Tony Dungy that has worked for him, that has played for him, that has been in his presence, because he was always intentional about all of the facets of who he was as a person, instead of just being monomaniacally focused on one. And so to your point, and I think, you know, Atomic Habits, you mentioned this earlier, James Clear, I think this is the piece that I like. It's not about, in my mind, total immersion, if you would, as in everything else doesn't exist, because I believe that's a fiction that we create for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And it's an overwhelming burden for a lot of people. Right. It makes it, when I do business coaching, a lot of times I talk to business owners because they think they gotta, you know, I've got to double how many leads I have this month, or I've got to triple my conversion rate, or I got to increase my prices. I got to double my prices in order to make money. And the reality is small changes over time. 10%. If you can increase how many leads you get per month by 10%, and you can increase how much you convert just by 10%, you can double your sales. Right? Or by 50%, I'm sorry, you can double your sales. By 10%, you can increase your sales by 20%. You can increase your top line revenue by 20% just by doing those two things, right? Because they compound upon each other. And it's actually a little bit more than 20%. But just so that you can see it, you don't have to make these huge goals. And so to your point, not Charles Duhigg, I think Charles Duhigg might talk about this a little bit, but if you remember, James Clear talked about it, and I loved it. What he said was, the hack to immersing yourself in a new habit, mm-hmm. It's called habit stacking.
Yeah, I remember that. I love that, habit stacking. That's right. Key.
And to your point, I think that what you did was you already ate. That was a habit. You just made sure that when you ate, whatever you ate, and I watched you. This was something that was really amazing because, right, me and Randy worked together. You see it, and so we would have lunches that are catered,
and they were delicious.
Right,
desserts
and everything,
the whole thing.
And Randy didn't go and sit in a corner all by himself and not partake, or he didn't bring his own lunch. He just, what he would do is whatever was there, he would go and find what it was that he could eat from what was there, and he would make him a plate of what he could eat, and he would talk and chill, and he didn't have to abruptly become this,
right,
monomaniacally focused. I only eat this, and I can't hang out with nobody, and I can't think, and I can't smell, and because that would have been unsustainable.
That was just at home.
Right. But what he was able to do was he was able to look at, if I'm going to eat, this is the habit that I'm going to make.
Sure.
And therefore, nothing else in his life had to change. So making that one change became so much easier because it was just that one thing.
Yeah.
All I got to do is take the bread off of it. I can eat the meat. That's fine.
And that was the key too, going out with people, right? Because I started thinking about, how is this going to affect home? Right? Because, hey, get this. You guys, you may decide you want to do something. So you got to do some hacks. And I want to share a couple of hacks with you. So some hacks so that what Rob is talking about, that monomaniacal approach doesn't crack your family, mm-hmm, right? Mm-hmm. We talk about, I was reading an article, and they were talking about how, like, how Tiger Woods became, he's a billionaire now, right? You just saw that, right? How he became so successful. It was to the exclusion of everything else, mm-hmm, right? And they talked about everything else was excluded. I don't do anything else but practice golf. And then he got married. And that's when I personally said, it's over. He'll never be successful again. And then he got hurt, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember one of his contemporaries says, we'll see how he is once he gets a family, and we'll see how he is once he gets an injury. Exactly. Because you can't apply those same things. Now, we watched the pandemic break a lot of people's habits too, mm-hmm, right? Habits of going to work, habits of doing it a certain way. Now you can't get people to work. Yeah. Right. But here's the thing. So one of the things that for me, I says, I had to change some things. We talked about getting up at 4 a.m. I had stopped all of that. And I noticed the reason why I got up at 4 a.m. was because it allowed me deep work time. This is what Cal Newport talked about in his book called, Deep Work. Y'all see that?
Mm-hmm. In front of your chest.
So deep work, right? So Deep Work by Cal Newport. And this is one of the things that he really jumped into. And it talks about taking yourself away to a place. And this is when I say immersion, taking yourself away to a place where you can concentrate, whether that is, in your mental opportunities, or whether, you go and I read about a guy who would get on a plane and he would finish a whole book. He would just take a plane ride. He said, look, the plane ride cost me, $500. He said, but guess what? I'm not doing anything but that one thing because I'm not distracted.
Exactly.
So that's what I'm talking about, the immersive ability not to be distracted.
So let me jump in real quick and ask you this question. What I'm hearing you say is that when you say immersion, what you're talking about is intense focus. Is that accurate?
Well, I know immersion works, right? Although I know I have the kind of lifestyle, and many people do too, that you won't be able to immerse. You won't be able to say, hey, I'm going to learn Spanish. I'm going to Venezuela. You won't be able to do this. But if you intensely focus on the thing, and here's what's interesting, Rob, is that during the time, like with the left hand, it felt uncomfortable. All that time I'm shooting, and then of course, when you play somebody, you want to go back to those bad habits, whatever. But if you force yourself, keep going through it, and it ingrates. And it's just time had went by, time had gone by, and then when I went back after about 6 months of not hooping, it's as if it was the main hand. Now, all that time, during that time, Rob, uncomfortable. Felt like a left hand. All that kind of stuff, right? Take some time away. So jumping in and totally immersion versus that deep work opportunity. Now, not everybody's going to be able to do that. I'm saying what I have found that works for me. And now, as it relates to the business that Rob and I are starting to help people, here's what I found is that I had made it almost secondary, and I started watching the worst way to start your business is to make it as if it's secondary, right? Make it as if it's a thing. You pull it in and you put it back out. And I found that doesn't work for me because there's too many other things. And y'all know y'all got a lot of stuff going on in your lives. We find that with entrepreneurs. They got a lot of stuff going on when we're coaching them and facilitating them. There's a lot of stuff going on, and something will kind of get in more than others. And next thing you know, you're not doing that thing successfully. Right. So I'm saying, what would happen if I instituted these things I know that work, this immersive approach, right? And that's what I had to talk with myself about. I says, look, man of leisure, I get it, but let's construct our days differently so that we can not be monomaniacal, but that we can feed all of the mouths that
right. And so that we can focus and I think
work,
that what I'm hearing you talk about is
time
prioritizing, right? Like because something that's there, and I just want to point this out because me and you talk about this all the time. But for those of you all that are listening, there's a nuance that's there in what Randy was just saying. It's really important. There's a difference between something that's a priority and something that's an idea, something that's a potentiality, right? A priority, and I always tell my students, I'm like, you can tell somebody's priorities by looking at their calendar. I've heard it doesn't matter what you say out of your mouth, because the things that you block time for, the things that you say, in Gary Keller's words, yes to, such that you say no to everything else in that particular point in time, those are your priorities. And I remember for me, one of the things that I had to
guess
do.
How my calendar looked? A lot of leisure time.
Exactly, right?
And what was my priority?
Man of leisure, right? And for me, I remember this came in for me when I was thinking about the fact that I wanted to be a good husband, I wanted to be a good father. But I would look at my calendar and my wife and my kids were not on my calendar. And that was something that
planning your priorities. I got you.
planning your priorities, scheduling your priorities. And I realized that in all of the times when I felt like I was being a bad or not bad, but when I was being absent, when I was really busy and didn't have time for my kids, every time that existed, it was when I removed time blocking for family time. And I just tried to let family time happen sporadically whenever it would. But whenever I set aside, right, and now from Saturday, 12 p.m. to Monday morning, I don't do anything related to my business. I don't do anything related to anything else. My family has my full undivided attention. If they decide to not be with me at all, I'm available for my family. If they going out and playing and doing whatever, I'm still available for my family. That's an intentional block of time. And then during the week, I have specific blocks of time set aside that I don't schedule meetings, that I don't schedule going anywhere, that I don't do anything. It's just for my kids, for me to be able to hang out and teach them and train them and do whatever, that they can plan their day around, they can plan their schedules around. And I found out, for me, that was imperative because it also allowed me to be more productive in that other time that wasn't family time, in order to make sure that time didn't encroach into family time, because family time
compounding
is
effect,
family time.
Right?
Exactly.
When you schedule stuff in, it's really funny, man. So I just had to talk with myself. Next day, boom, pop right out of bed.
Mm-hmm.
Whether I only had, like a couple hours of sleep, but it was a priority for me to get up and get on my work. Now, with that 4 a.m, why I chose that time is because nothing's happening, nothing's moving. And I was able to get in some really concentrated work. And then one of the other things I decided to do was, instead of, like I say, bringing the business in after I do stuff, I'm putting it first. Now, here's what ended up happening, Rob. As soon as we had made the goal, hey, 90 days, we're going to do this, I took I started teaching some high school students about entrepreneurship, right? So 3 weeks of that teaching, it takes you away. So that time was dedicated to something else, but I thought, you know what, this is important. Then after that, just right now, I'm in another 3-week cycle of teaching 11 to 17-year-olds about money management, right? Went with a guy that has a nonprofit, and he says, hey, could you do this for him? But my point is that there's always going to be something that gets in where you would normally have said, okay, I'm going to do this during the time. But at 4 a.m, there's nobody to teach. 4 a.m, that's you. And then what I've decided to do is, during that time, I'm going to, now keep in mind, it's 4 a.m. So people think, oh, you're not going to get sleep. Yep, I'm going to get sleep. I'm going to go to bed at 10. I'll get 6 hours of sleep. And then sometime during that day, I'm going to get another 2. Trust.
There you go.
But that's one of those deals where you put it on your schedule. All right. If I can work from 4 to 6, and during that time, I'm going to concentrate. I'm going to do my web classes, my videos and stuff like that. Right. And then I'm going to work on that business, but it's going to be time blocked. It's going to be, I'm totally concentrating on this for 2 hours. I'm totally concentrating on this for 2 hours. I'm going to rest and totally concentrate on that from this time to this time. I already got it set up. So that way you get it all in. It's immersed. I'm immersing myself in just that thing, or if you want to say totally focused. And then I'm not making the other stuff secondary. And then,
I agree 100%.
That's kind of that thing, man, that I know this works because I've done it before.
Yep.
And it's worked brilliantly, and nothing has changed dramatically that it wouldn't work.
Right.
It's like,
I agree with you.
8-track tapes would work. No.
So talk to me about this, Randy, and because I know for me, what I have struggled with is Parkinson's law, right? Like, I'm a worker. I know that I will just work and work and work and put in time and put in time and put in time and put in time. And for me, what wound up happening was I would block out what I felt like it's too much time and get caught
your
into
activities would fill that time too.
And my activities would fill that time, and my perfectionism would fill that time. So instead of getting stuff done, I would keep refining it and keep refining it and keep refining it and keep refining it, and not putting it out and all the rest of the type of stuff. When you're thinking about your time blocking and you're thinking about, your focus time, how do you navigate the space of what's the appropriate amount of time that I should be spending on this?
Yeah, that's one of those deals where, when I was starting a lot of online properties, right? I had a goal to, put out like 365 different, in other words, a online or digital piece of property a day. Now I made it for about 20 days. What I would do is I would say before the midnight happened, I will have this product done enough to present to the world for scrutiny. Right. So what ended up happening is that I would say, okay, I believed that it would take 2 hours. You always had to multiply it times 3. I'm serious. Right. And then you say, okay, I anticipated it's going to take 2 hours, but it's probably going to take 6. But I'm going to put down 2 hours. And it's one of those deals where you kind of make a deal with yourself, or you fool yourself, or whatever it is. Allowing Parkinson's law to work for you in that, it might take this, but I'm only putting down and blocking off 2 hours. And I'm telling you, in my case, it was like a day. It got done. Right. And then, 20 days, I was able to put out and create 20 different products. I saw that it worked. What happened with me was like, oh, this works. Let's stop. That's where the momentum part affects you. You go, oh my gosh, this really works. And then, new shiny thing, right? Go off to something else.
And that's an important thing, I think, in this conversation for us to address, right? Because there are sprints and there are marathons, and
I'm a sprinter.
Right. But here's the key, right? Because you can do a marathon in a series of sprints. You just have to know that you're doing a marathon in a series of sprints.
Right.
Right. Whereas with a lot of people, and this is what I was struggling with when I was training for my marathon, what I struggled with was I wasn't doing the marathon in a series of sprints. I was sprinting the entire marathon, which was horrible. Mentally, it sets you up improperly, right? And then I changed my training. Right. I was sprinting the whole marathon. Like I was just trying to run faster and faster and faster, and until my body just couldn't run faster. And I was just trying to prolong, right? And so I got to a point where I've told you this story before. I was at 10 miles, and like I'm not running super fast. Like, don't get me wrong, I hate running. I was never a great runner, even though I was in shape enough. I ran, a sub 24 minute, a sub 22 minute 3 mile when I was in the Marine Corps, but I was never a great runner. So I got to the point where I was running 10 miles at 10-minute mile pace, right? But mentally, I was broken. Physically, I could still run. I still had to run like a mile and a half back to the house when I finished this. And I had this kind of existential moment, right? But I realized, I was like, I still got 16 miles left before I would finish a marathon. This is when I'm training. And I was like, I don't want to do that's 1.5 times what I just did. And I don't even want to do what I just did again, let alone 1.5 times.
That's funny.
And I realized that I had to mentally prepare myself for the journey. And so what I started doing is just like what you talked about, because I'm a sprinter too, right? I love checking boxes. I love achieving. I love getting it done, quote unquote. So I had to create ways for me to get it done while doing something that there was no way for me to get it done quickly. Right? You look at the best marathoners in the world, they still running for 2 hours. Right? Like just think about that. Fathom that for a second.
That's a long time to be running.
For the entirety of a movie, they're running.
They're running.
And they're not just running, they're running really fast because they're the best in the world. They're running 5-minute to 6-minute mile pace.
Incredible.
Right? Now, I was nowhere near that. So, right, I'm looking at 4 to 6 hours, depending on what day it is, right? And what I figured out during that period of time for me was I had to break it up into short sprints. So what I started doing is I said, okay, what do I normally run a mile in if I'm running a good mile? 7-8 minutes if I'm running a good mile. So I picked 8 minutes as the timeline that I would sprint, that I would run. Because I know that I could consistently push myself for 8 minutes and that I will be significantly I will cover a significant amount of ground during that period of time. But then I would celebrate by walking and relaxing and drinking and eating and listening to music or whatever I was doing for 4 minutes. I'm still moving forward. I'm still gaining ground,
That's a good
but
break it
I'm
down. I love that.
celebrating being at the mountaintop of, yes, I just did 8 minutes because I know I can do this repetitively over and over and over again, right? I give my body time to recover, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I was able to finish my marathon that way because my mind was not feeling like it had to be in this constant state of focus and alert for the entirety of the marathon. And I think so often, like you talked about, 20 days, you was like, I got this. But then you were like, but it's still 345 to go.
Exactly. And that I didn't do what you just talked about, right? These series of sprints. Hence the reason why it says, now the new way I'm going to go about things is from 4 a.m, because I know that's time. I tried it all, man. Right. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like staying up late, and then that affects your family because you're not in bed with your loved ones and all that kind of stuff. Right. And then your body eventually rejects that. Right. Because if you're up late, you might be eating. And if you're eating, then your body's going to have its own, right. All these different things. And I started thinking, wait, and then it get to that point where you just can't stay up late.
Yep. Your body's like, no, we're going to sleep.
Let's do this, right? It just has a negative effect. But that 4 a.m, and that's one of those deals, those discipline hacks, that's totally up to you. And if you have seen evidence that it works, in the face
replicate it,
the rest becomes, why are you just being disagreeable?
Right.
With what you know does work, period.
And there's one other thing, and Charles Duhigg talks about this, and I think it applies to what we're talking about here, because there's a paradigm though, right? There's an idea that I've got to do this every day. I've got to not miss anything. I got to be perfect, right? And what Charles Duhigg talks about, and there's a bunch of studies that they did that showed that it takes about 67 days on average for a new behavior to become automatic. But here was the thing in that study that I thought was so impactful. The people didn't have to do it every day for 67 days. They just had to do it consistently every week for 67 days. So as long as you did it a majority of the week for 67 days, so if you did it 4 out of 7 days for 67 days, the habit embedded itself. And here's the beauty of it. Once you get to the third of that 67-ish days, it actually becomes easier because it becomes harder to not do the thing than to actually do it.
See, man, that's where the power is, right? And then we're going to get into our good topic here in a minute. So here's something that they also, Cal Newport talked about. He was talking about Tim Creeder, I think his name is. He says, I'm not busy. I'm the laziest, ambitious person I know. Right now, he says Creeder, he has a distaste for frantic work. Now, but what he did was he would just literally find a location, go to, concentrate on it. It's in that concentration and consistency that got stuff done.
Boom. Right? The two C's, you just put it together: concentration and consistency.
Right. And it can
not perfection,
change everything.
Consistency.
Now, like I talked about, for the 94 days, I was concentrated and I was consistent, and I let nothing get in the way of it. I mean, there were times when my wife would bring something home and I'm looking around like, that's my favorite candy. And I mean, where I had to say, look, I says, while I am going through building up a habit of being able to say no, I'd appreciate it if you just didn't have it in the house. So now you're creating your environment. So now think about business, right? And the business that what we're doing. So what I've just decided to do is say, okay, this is what I'm concentrating on because I am this, as opposed to, oh, this is something I do. I'm going to bring it in after I get out of work. Because what I found was that didn't work. After class, I was tired. After teaching, I was teaching teenagers. Right. And then now I got a group of 11 to 17-year-olds. And let me tell you,
preteens and teenagers,
they take it out of you. Right.
Yeah.
Because you're trying, and then you see all the stuff that's happening and you're putting it in and you're doing, standing on one leg to keep your attention and all that kind of stuff. And I found that, man, I couldn't do this business after or as a secondary thought. I just couldn't do it. So I'm gonna concentrate it on in the morning. And I got the kind of business where I can concentrate on something early if I want to, create it, spin it up, and it's ready. Get it out there for testing. You see where I'm going with this? And now here's what has been a little bit of a difference. When I bought the on the ground company, bought into that company, right? Now that's a little different. That's kind of, but still, I'm still taking my part of it. I'm taking it e-commerce. I'm doing everything I can to take it, a portion of it, e-commerce that way. And it's working beautifully. I just had filled a big, 50 bottle order because I was able to reach out to somebody and says, hey, listen, why don't you put our product in front of your customers? And she was like, oh my gosh, that's a good idea. So in other words, I go to one person and they have people, and then that gets us orders. But then that becomes an opportunity for one time. It comes in, it goes over to our manager, and then they get it done. That's the kind of stuff.
There you go. You go find the people that have your people.
And that works beautifully. Now, here's something.
Just pause real quick before you go forward, because I want y'all to pay attention. He just dropped a nugget right there. That is like
y'all get it.
That's business gym. I want to just one of them stop message moments, right? Like, you got to pay attention. What Randy just explained was how you can improve your business. Instead of trying to find your customers individually, go to where they already are, and get with someone who already has convinced them to know, like, and trust them, and leverage their relationship.
That's it.
By providing value to both parties at the same time. Their customers get an amazing juice in this case, and the influencer gets to give value to their customers, and that to come through them.
I had to show them that. I said, now listen, this is how you can, raise your value quotient in the eyes of and then at the same time, we know how we're getting helped, right?
Exactly.
So, and it's one of those deals, Rob, when we're looking at, and this is something that we're doing now, right? We're going to take here's our case study, if you will. We're going to take two companies, and we're going to, and I've identified one strong one. I'm pretty sure, and there's another one in Las Vegas that somebody that I know that could probably use our help too. Now we're going to take these two companies, and literally this is all we're saying. Hey, if we find you 10, give us 5. In other words, we're going to go and improve. And we use that 50% number because if we find you 50, then give us 25. If we find you 100, give us 50, right? Now we've time framed our approach to getting this done too. Now I've got some other things that we're doing, Rob, that, that'll generate revenue for us and all that kind of stuff too. But those are like the marathon approach. But the sprint is, let's take these companies, let's show them where the money is in their companies. The marathon part is, well, as we do that, and then we create that content, we place that content somewhere, and we do our thing there, right? Now, here's a wonderful thing that it's actually something that I read over the weekend about this guy named Sam Bankman-Fried. You guys ever heard of Sam Bankman-Fried? Have you heard of this guy before?
No. I think that I remember talking to you about it, but I hadn't heard about him before I talked to you about him.
He's in the crypto space. But here's something interesting. And this guy's becoming even more and more fascinating to me. Right now, he runs a $30 billion company that he was able to spin up, and in less than 5 years, I want to say it's like 3 years, but he doesn't have a lot of people running it. He's doing this amazing thing, so much so that now because NFTs and the crypto space is just getting smashed. Depending on when you're listening to this, it was getting smashed. So of course, what happens when people start selling, more people, they make a run on their crypto, and then next thing you know, value starts going to zero, and then companies go bankrupt. So this guy was able to loan a company called BlockFi, who's also in that space, $250 million. He was going to give them a $250 million revolving line of credit, a $500 million financing to Voyager Digital. So now he must have identified. Now, Rob, here's an interesting thing about that. He identified that these companies are important to the space and, of course, to the business he's in.
Mm-hmm.
So now they're seeing him as like the savior. But we've had that before. I was reading about J.P. Morgan way back in 1918, I don't know, 1908 or something like that. He did the
early 1900s,
thing, right? He said, listen, we can't let this go, situation go bankrupt, right? So I'm going to loan money to prop up the economy.
Yep, the railroad. Yep, he did the railroads and he did the economy one
2008,
time. Yep.
What did Warren Buffett do? He called up the Secretary of Commerce or Treasury and says, we cannot let this happen. I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to, and that was one of those moments, man, that I started thinking, now these are guys that have gone out and immersed themselves or totally focused on creating revenue. In other words, an opportunity, so that when these opportunities came, they were able to take advantage of it. Right? They were absolutely able to step in. And I just look at that as I'm fascinated with these guys and these young ladies that are able to literally position themselves to be of that kind of service.
That gets back to what you talked about with Floyd Mayweather. Earlier on, you were talking about it, and what you admired about him was that whole stay ready so you ain't got to get ready.
Stay ready so you don't have to get ready. Right. And that's what when we're going into these businesses, and the two that we have, on our radar right now, we'll be able to quickly look at and discover where the money is. Right. That's why we can do it so quickly, is because we'll be able to identify it.
And that's
now
the easy
we have
part.
to implement it, of course.
Right. It's the key. And the thing that really what we come in to help people do. And I think this is why it's so, there's a lot of people that have an idea about what they should be doing or what could be beneficial for their business. What we're really gifted at, and the reason why we can do it quickly is because we go in and we say, okay, boom, look at the business. You seeing what I'm seeing? Okay, we both seeing the same thing. But here's the issue. Here's what you're not seeing. Here's what you're missing. Here's the blind spot. And more importantly, here's how you can overcome that blind spot. And we help people to implement those things such that they can make the changes. Just like this conversation we've been having with you today. There's not a person out there that's listening to this right now that doesn't know that you need to be more focused, or that doesn't know that you need to be putting your efforts better placed in what you're trying to do.
Yep.
Same thing Randy and I've talked about with amongst each other. We know what we should be doing as far as
right there with you
improvements, but what we have learned through the things that we've just been going through, right, is that there's a reason why we're not doing it. And there's things that we have tried that have worked, but we have not been sustainable. And that's the key. Why is it not sustainable? Oftentimes what we will do is we will point to ourselves and say, because of some sort of moral failing of mine, because of some sort of inadequacy of mine,
we will beat ourselves up. Trust.
And that is the thing that will completely undermine your journey. What Randy just went through, what Charles Duhigg talks about in The Power of Habit, what James Clear talks about in Atomic Habits, what's the book, the deep work book that you just talked about? Who's the author of that?
Cal Newport.
What Cal Newport talks about in deep work. All of these books will get to talking to you about and helping you to understand. And this is what Randy just really, really expertly explained to you today is you have to figure out how to implement this knowledge in your life, specifically for you. You have to understand what works. He talked about he couldn't do this same work that he's doing from 4 to 6 or 4 to 8 in the morning. He couldn't do from 10 to 2 in the morning. Right. So it's not just blocking the time away. There's more considerations. There's more things that you have to think about. And it's imperative that you have, if you're not able to navigate this on your own, that's what we specialize in. That's what we're doing for businesses. Yeah. And I hope you all take away from this conversation that nuance of you got to figure out why it's not working for you. And don't fall back to the easy answer of, because I'm not good enough, because that's not it.
If you get nothing from what we talked about, get that. You are enough, right? You've heard enough people say that kind of stuff. I think Brene Brown made a whole, livelihood off of, you are enough. Maybe I'm not, maybe it's not Brene Brown, but anyway. So, but you may need that degree of accountability. Right now, I'm going to show you guys, we are creating, and we're going to, I don't want to pop up the website right now. But anyway, because I'm looking at it, I'm going, boy, that needs
be on the lookout. Coming
help.
soon.
Yeah. And then we're just going to be about it.
Mm-hmm.
Not something that we're going to pull in from the side. We're going to be about this work.
Mm-hmm.
Get these companies that increase that they want, right? Get you the increase in your business that you want. If you're an entrepreneur starting up and you can afford to do it the way we're talking about, if we find the money, give us half. Right now, that right there, and then come along with us. Here's the invitation, everybody. Come along with us.
Yep.
Right? Watch us as we do this. Keep in mind, we talked about our own failings. We talked about our own lack of focuses. We talked about some things that we notice that's not working. As soon as you make a goal, what happens, right? We talking about this, and we're going to be talking about this ongoing and getting over it together. That's the hope.
Exactly. Like that's what I think the beauty of this journey is, right? Like so often I was watching this. I think it was TD Jakes that was talking about this. And what he said is, so often you look at the people that you admire and you're seeing them at the top of the mountain. You're seeing them after they have made it. You're not seeing them in the muck, in the dirt, in the grime, in the struggle. And part of this journey, and it's something that Randy and I have talked about a lot, part of my personal goal in general, and part of what we're trying to do for you in this medium, is to give you the behind the scenes, to let you see what it really looks like to build a business and to set a goal like hitting $100,000 in 90 days and doing those types of things, because so often people do it, then tell you about it. And there's this thing called revisionist history, right? And it's not revisionist history like the bad version where people are actually trying to actively hide stuff. No. There's a part of the brain, the way that our brain works is when we look back over our history, we edit out all of the things that are not consistent with our reality of today, right? It's very difficult to tell a story, especially if it's a positive story, to tell it and talk about negative things, because that's not congruent with the reality of today. So your brain doesn't bring those things up. So it's not that people are intentionally misleading. It's that the way that we see it is through rose-colored glasses. That's why nostalgia, and Brene Brown talks about this in her book, Atlas of the Heart. Nostalgia is a connection to the past that's not rooted in the realities of the past, right? Think about when you hear people talk about the good old days, right? And well, when I was a kid, things were, now, if you actually dig in, you will hear a whole bunch of bad stories from them about what was happening there, but that's not their memory of it. And that's what you get with so many people at the end of it. So the reason why this is so powerful, and the reason why I'm so happy and glad, because right, like I love the fact that Randy is putting this out there, because y'all that know him that are watching this, y'all know that that's not his normal style. His normal style is not to let y'all in his business. But I've been impressing on him and pushing on him, because I'm like, people can learn so much from us, from watching us fail on the way to success.
Yeah.
And I just want to applaud you, brother, in public, in this space as well, because I know that there's going to be so many people that are going to benefit from this journey that we're on. Yeah. And I really appreciate you for jumping on this and doing this and allowing me to accompany you, and for being open and transparent and letting people know we are making mistakes. Man. There are things that are going to be messed up, but that's how you get there. That's the reality of what this looks like.
That's it, y'all. So, hey, that's the show. We'll get together again next week. We got some more interesting things. When you start seeing those, found them 25,000, found the company 50,000, found the company 10,000 in 10 minutes. Be on the lookout for that, because that's that journey we're talking about, right? And then you get to come along with us and see, how did they do that? What did they find? And then you're able to pull the nuggets out from that. We may do it in a newsletter. We may do it in a variety of ways, but we're going to be putting it out there just like that. Found them this much. And this is an interesting thing that you'll be able to see too, is that sometimes we have a framework, right? We have an idea how we think that company in that industry should be doing something, right? And we may say, and here's why we believe that. But we'll say, Rob, did you know that from if what they're doing now, this approach that they're taking is getting them this revenue, but if they did this, here's something else that could happen to their bottom line in a positive way, right? And you see that, and you see your company in there, you go, well, if they can help them, they definitely can help me. Then give us a call.
There we go.
All right, everybody, that's the show. We will talk to you again on next week.